Close this. All right. Are you live right now? Okay. Good to finally speak to you in person. Yeah, I have a little YouTube channel. Okay. Yeah. All right. Still sound okay to you? All right. Just waiting on Mr. Flat Earth Aussie. He said he would be willing to join me for an after show. I don't know if you'd be willing to if you don't have time, but the invitation is open to you. Oh, that'd be great. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, and I assume he should be going first, right? Let's see. Did you guys talk about any kind of time frames for the openings or anything like that? Okay. I'm gonna resend the link because I don't know what's going on. He was in the chat.
All right. How about now?
Guess we'll be late.
It's pretty typical for modern day debate.
Yeah. Hey, there's something I've been wanting to ask you. Your moral model, is there like a book or a single video where it's comprehensively laid out?
Well, I'm working on a book. I have a new co-author because my last co-author had a lot of tragedies. So I'm working on a book. It should be published hopefully by the end of the year. But there's several videos on it.
They're all in a single playlist?
Yes, I think I have a model secular objective morality playlist.
What's it called? Secular what?
Objective morality. It's one of the playlists on my channel.
Secular objective morality. Okay. I don't know how I missed that. Thank you. I will definitely check that out. What the fuck?
Yep, Kaz is a flat earther. That's right.
Oh no, hell no, I'm not a flat earther. You got lots of flat earthers in your chat right now?
I doubt it. Unlikely.
No. Man, I hope we have a lot of people in the chat from around the world tonight. I have an experiment I want to try in my after show. But I'm not gonna say anything else. Oh, here he is. Mr. Flat Earth Aussie.
G'day. How's it going?
Hey,
Not too bad.
Okay, it's nice to meet you, mate.
Nice to meet you, sir. All right. So,
How are
I
you,
guess
T?
we're. Do you have 10 minutes opening statements? Is that right, or is there anything else?
That sounds about right.
Okay.
How's my camera looking? Is it right like that, or am I better off putting it?
it's fine.
Lane.
You look good.
Okay. I'll be honest; it's a little hard to understand you on my end.
He was asking, should he change his background because it's really bright, but it doesn't. His coverings prevent the brightness.
No,
I just want to put it on landscape.
the aesthetics look good to me. Okay, so 10 minutes opening, 1 hour open discussion, 30-minute Q&A. Sounds good. Do you want me to call you Iron Horse or Flat Earth Aussie? Or you don't care?
Oh, Iron Horse is the nick I use these days, so preferably that.
Well, let me fix that real quick so I don't mess up too much. And are you okay with going first, Flat Earth Aussie or Iron Horse?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. All right, then let's go ahead and get this moving. All right, here we go. People of the internet, welcome to Modern Day Debate. Tonight we are debating, is gravity a hoax? We have Iron Horse, aka Flat Earth Aussie, crossing swords with T-Jump. And going first tonight is Flat Earth Aussie, so I will turn it over to him for his 10-minute opening statement. Flat Earth Aussie, Iron Horse, excuse me. The floor is all yours.
Yeah, thank you, Kaz, and great to be here. Good to see you again, T-Jump. I'm going to do a short introduction of myself. My name is Ross Thatcher. My YouTube moniker is Iron Horse, formerly known by the joke name Flat Earth Aussie Jesus. I haven't always been a flat earther. I was born and raised in the country, and just as I was entering the home computer age, writing programs using every bit and byte my Commodore VIC-20 had to offer at 13 years of age, I moved to the coast. There I discovered surfing, mates, girls, and rugby league football. I turned to exploring the coastline rather than computers for many years. I spent my 16th year as an exchange student in North California, which gave me a greater appreciation for Australia and our education standards. My love of nature eventually led me to an ideal career as a pet store owner, when my wife and I bought a small pet store that had just closed down. We took over the day our eldest daughter turned 2 and my son was just 3 months old. Our youngest daughter was practically born in the place, conveniently waiting until 5 minutes after closing to be born. 7 years later, the business sold for over $200,000 profit on what we had as part of a property settlement on our divorce. I went on to run a successful contract cleaning business for the next 5 years, cleaning all night and studying nature's ways by day. The ocean, the forests, the weather, the stars, the moon, the tides, all these things were my life, my lifestyle, as well as studying natural health and healing and brewing my own health tonics. This coming winter solstice, I'll be turning 51 years young, happily engaged with my beautiful 15-year younger fiance, and flat earth truth and realization has dominated my existence after formerly being interested in all manner of hidden truths about our reality. Being interested in all manner of Today I intend to destroy the ridiculous notion that mass attracts mass and liquids and gas by virtue of being massive, contained by the non-solid barrier of absolutely nothing. Does gravity exist? So far as the scientific consensus of things of mass dropping through the medium of air at 9.8 meters per second squared, absolutely. That's the observable consensus of physics everywhere on the planet Earth. The question is, why does the ground stop things dropping? The answer is resistance. Resistance from what? The density of the ground. So far, density is already winning over gravity. So 1 point to resistance as the force, 0 to gravity. Well, why doesn't it fall up, asks every incredulous glober ever. Well, what sort of resistance does the density of air give? Well, at free fall speed, it offers very little resistance, most of which can be explained solely by the attributes of shape alone, though relative density is definitely a real influencing factor as well. Clearly, the heliocentric web of lies is 100% relying on the unproven belief in the invisible pulling force of mass, for even the most simple definition for their spinning spaceball to be even remotely viable as a scientific belief. The idea that everything of mass is pulled towards the centre is the height of pseudoscientific belief. Unnecessary, unrequired, absolutely extraneous to the reality of the stationary planar Earth we clearly live upon. I'll use some real-world examples momentarily, but to entertain the space-age fantasy today's heliolists swear allegiance to, I challenge my space-brained opponent to find just one example of everyday life experiences taken from space, showing ships or planes from a distance seeming to appear to operate upside down or sideways on the spinning spaceball, or even any object dropping in a direction apart from the universally observed direction of down. We all know the fanciful excuses used to gloss over the absolute absence of any of Earth's motions. Yet when a skydiver leaps from a moving plane, they very quickly lose the plane's momentum and drop straight down to the awaiting Earth, exhibiting absolutely zero of its alleged actual rotation motion. Yet imagine landing on the back of a speeding train at 100 miles per hour. It's barely moving 1/10 the speed of the Earth's spin, yet the sudden change in speed would be likely to rip their legs out from beneath them, earning the daredevil a posthumous award into the Darwin Hall of Fame. Even the most simple experiments can dismiss any motion of the Earth, which is just as important a factor of the heliocentric dialect as the equally mythical gravity. We drop a rubber ball onto a moving conveyor belt, the momentum of even a slow-moving belt will impart some momentum onto the bouncy ball, and it will rebound in the direction of the momentum, no matter how tiny the speed. Yet, drop it directly onto the floor, it drops straight down, it bounces straight up. According to our heliocentric faithful followers, the ground isn't just moving eastwards at over 1,000 miles per hour, but has another velocity on its annual journey around the sun, the equivalent of almost 87 times the speed of sound. So basically, we're told this invisible pulling force of gravity is pulling the ball inwards towards it with such force that the ball falls sideways 2 different directions, one at max speed of 1.35, the other at Mach 87, all in order to create an optical illusion of dropping straight down and bouncing straight up. But a relatively tiny speed of a treadmill, even moving just 1 mile per hour, 1/776th of the speed of sound, and gravity doesn't know to correct for that? Maybe the stationary planar Earth adherent could be forgiven for thinking Earth isn't moving at all, that there's a universal up and down, and without the need to keep everything clinging to the underneath and sides of a ball spinning through space, that the belief in the theory of gravity is totally extraneous to everyday observable physics. I can give multiple examples how relative density is basically the only relevant requirement now that we've analysed and dismissed all that is absurd about previously believed earthly phenomena. Let's take 3 balls identical in size, a lead shot put, a solid rubber ball, and a ball of styrofoam. Taken and released from a high bridge, the rubber and lead ball will hit the water at the exact same moment. The styrofoam has the same air resistance, yet due to the properties of its density, or more correctly, its air content in its physical makeup, it actually possesses some amount of buoyancy in the medium of air. By comparison, an air-filled balloon would waft down even more slowly. But both the solid balls with no air content drop 9.8 meters per second squared in the medium of air, as they both possess the same air resistance. But now, in water, gravity gets selective. Why? It pulls the lead ball down to the solid bed of the water, but leaves the rubber ball floating on the surface. This is a prime example of relative density and buoyancy. While it might be reasonable to say that the word weight can be substituted in many instances where the word gravity is used, even that would be a gross oversimplification. Even though the very word gravity was originally borrowed from the Latin gravis, which literally translates as weight, it's quite simple to prove that relative density also relies upon the attribute of volume. This thoroughly debunks any last notion of an invisible pulling force of mass attracting mass, which I'll put to rest by retrieving the lead ball from the bottom of the river and weighing it. Exactly 5 kilograms, whatever newtons of pulling force Earth's centre is allegedly exerting on it. I hammer and beat and roll it flat, then shape it into a dish. I weigh it again. Still exactly 5 kilograms, same amount of raw mass. But now when I place it in water, it magically floats. What sort of wizardry can debunk the force of gravity so easily? By altering the volume and turning it into a container of air, which also has extra mass and weight, it now floats. Relative density wins the game. Another example, I weigh an empty balloon. It weighs 100 grams. It sits flaccidly on the ground. I place a canister of helium on the scale. It weighs 10 kilos. I feel the balloon from the canister until the scale shows it weighs 9 kilograms. So now the balloon, with a knot tied into it, must weigh 1,100 grams or 1.1 kilograms. Its overall mass has increased by a kilogram, but its overall volume has to at least a cubic meter increase to a cubic meter or more. And we know that the mass of the ceiling cannot possibly contain more gravity than the Earth beneath. The relative density of the volume of the balloon relative to the density of air finally satisfies the globe incessantly asking, why down? Why not up? Gravity is not only an outdated theory for an outdated mythical belief, but we can equally dismiss it as the ancient superstitious explanation for tides. It may have served its purpose very well as the go-to god of the gaps throughout our former, somewhat darker ages. Yet the explanation of how the one mass of only one moon can pull water by virtue of its own mass twice per day has to be on par as ridiculous as a pressurized atmosphere bounded by a vacuum like a helium balloon stuck to the ceiling with no balloon. The global will demand that the moon's gravity will pull the oceans towards it for tide 1, then pull the Earth itself through its own ocean to create tide 2 on the rear side. Not only would this immediately negate tide 1, the 6 times stronger gravity of Earth would be pulling with the moon, thus negating tide 2, no matter how much spin they put on it. Not only was the moon the final nail in the heliocentric coffin when I last met T-Jump negating fictional space, I'll leave it as the final word debunking gravity on the absurd spinning spaceball cult belief.
All right, thank you so much, Iron Horse, and we will go ahead and kick it over to T-Jump for his 10-minute opening statement. T-Jump, the floor is all yours.
Gravity's really easy to prove. All we do is take a container, suck out all the air, make it a vacuum, put an object in it, and for some reason, even though there's nothing in there to cause relative density, it's completely empty, it's a vacuum, it will still fall down. And if you turn the container upside down and put a ball in it, it'll still fall down, which means there has to be some force that isn't relative density that is causing objects to go down and not up, because if we have a vacuum, there's no relative density, but it's still going down for some reason. That disproves relative density and disproves all of Flat Earth Aussie's argument and shows that there must be some force that pull things through a vacuum, and we're going to call that gravity, and it works. Everything else he said is scientifically wrong. The moon does pull water in one direction. If you pull water in one direction in a tub, the water on the other side will come to fill the giant hole that's placed, and that creates a second wave. There you go. That's where you have double different tides, different times of the day, because if there's an absence of water, the rest of the water is going to rush to fill the absence. There you go. Two tides, pretty easy. Yeah, it's not hard to prove that at all. There's also like the Atvos effect. If you are traveling east, you are actually lighter than if you're traveling west because of these effects. So it's not like this is hard stuff. I don't know what Aussie's confused about. Gravity's proven by vacuums and dropping balls in them. Problem solved. I'll conclude there.
All right. Thank you so much, T-Jump, for your opening statement. And let me just say to everybody in the chat, I want to let you know, especially if it's your first time joining us at Modern Day Debate, that we are a neutral platform hosting debates on science, religion, and politics. And we want you to feel welcome no matter what walk of life you're from. And if you have a question or a comment for one of tonight's debaters, please fire into the old live chat and be sure to tag me at Modern Day Debates. Super chats go to the top of the list. They will get first priority. All we ask is that you please keep it civil, attack the argument and not the person, as insults will not be read. And that goes for the general discourse in the live chat as well. Our invaluable moderators are working tirelessly to elevate the conversation, so please show them and the debaters and each other the respect of not hurling insults and attacks. Our guests are linked in the description below, whether you're listening on YouTube or via the podcast as well. So please, if you like what you're hearing, please check them out, click on their links and show them some love. Hit the like button if you like what you're hearing, subscribe so you can hear more juicy debates in the future. And also in the description, there'll be a link to the after show tonight that I'm going to be putting on. I believe Flat Earth Aussie, Iron Horse is going to be joining me, and I think T-Jump as well for a little bit. And then also, with that, we will kick it into the open discussion for 1 hour. Gentlemen, the floor is all yours. It's your first word.
You're muted.
I'm sorry. I have him muted, I think. My bad. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to quickly mention before we go any further, I'm having real trouble hearing this here. Is there any chance you can turn it up on the app that we're doing this through? Because I really struggled to hear T-Jump through that.
I can't control his volume.
Do you have a volume button on your phone, Aussie?
Yeah, I've got it turned right up, and it's like only half volume or something. So anyway, I'll work with it. I'll just struggle to listen in to whatever sort of responses you have. You started off with saying a vacuum is a proof of gravity, but you've got it all totally backwards, like usual. Is that the fact is that a vacuum is a complete lack of density. So why would a complete lack of density have more resistance to, say, water or mercury or something that has a lot of resistance? Now, we can float an anvil in mercury, we can float a rubber ball in water, but nothing is going to float in a vacuum. So a vacuum is the absolutely worst example you could have possibly used to counteract relative density. It's the complete, total lack of density.
How does density apply a force in one direction or the other?
Well, it's not applying a force. The force is resistance. So if it stops something from dropping, then that's the resistant force. If there's no density, there's no resistance, so it drops.
Right. So density, if relative density is a resistance, then there has to be something else applying a force to cause it to go down to resist against, right?
Well, yeah, if you lifted it up in the first place, if you left it resting on the ground, it's not going to go anywhere. So you pick something up, that's the force. You let it go, the reaction is dropping. If you don't pick it up, it won't react, it won't drop.
So density is a resistance. It stops things from falling. Like if it's on the ground, it's resisting it to stop it from falling. If there was nothing there, it would fall, right? If like the ground disappeared, it would just fall. Yeah. So there has to be a force.
Yeah, it's very simple, very basic, very obvious.
Right. So
something we can observe everywhere.
So there has to be a force causing it to go down. Why is it going down in the first place?
You didn't listen to what I just said. There's no force making it go down. There's a lack of a force, nothing resisting it, so that's what it does. When the first observation in anything you do in science is you make the observation first, then you design the argument to support it one way or the next. What do we observe in nature is things drop unless they've got something of density beneath them to resist them. There's no evidence of anything falling sideways towards something due to its mass. It all goes universally straight down. That's physics. First law of it, observation.
Yeah, so if there's zero forces, there is zero movement. So any movement requires a force. So if it's going down, that means there has to be a force causing it to go down. Otherwise, it would do nothing. If there's no forces, it would do nothing. It would just stay there and do nothing.
That's right.
So there has to be a force causing things to go down, right?
Well, actually, there's a force causing things to stop falling, and that is density. Without that, it will just keep dropping, as we've already asserted. You don't need a force to cause it. You need a force to lift it in the first place.
So I can stop this from falling. I've stopped it. It is now stopped. It is no longer falling. But if I let it go, it starts to fall. There's more force that's being added to it. So
you were resisting it.
Where does the force coming from? When I let it go, something has to add force to it to make it go down. What is the thing adding force to it to make it go down?
No, you are creating a resistant force with your hand, and you're removing a resistant force.
Aussie,
You're
the
not
resistant
adding
force
another
does
force,
nothing.
you're
The resistance
removing
is
one.
irrelevant here. I don't care about the resistance. Why does it continue to speed up when I let it go? It goes faster and why does it go faster? If it was, it has to change. It goes from 0 to plus 1 meter per second, 2 meters per second, 3 meters per second. It's speeding up. It's going faster. How is it going faster? What is adding speed to it?
By virtue of its own mass and the lack of resistance of the medium of air.
No,
as I said, if you dropped it in
that's
water, it's not going to
a
drop that
positive
speed, is it?
number.
Because the water has more density.
Ozzy, you need a positive number here. Something needs to add a force to it. You can't just say it automatically adds a force to itself. It can't do that because it could add, if it was only itself, then it would go in no direction. So the reason it's going in one direction, not the other direction, has to be, there has to be something there to add a force to the thing to make it go in one direction, not the other direction. The thing itself can't do that. The objects within its own mass can never cause it to go down on its own. It can't do that because all of the masses inside of itself apply equally to every direction. So why does it go down, Aussie? What force is causing it to go down?
Okay. Is it still going down now?
No.
No, because it's met a place of resistance.
I don't resist.
You applied a force to it by lifting it. You applied another force of resistance by holding it, then you remove the resistant force. So physics, because it's a thing of mass, is automatically going to want to drop until it is at a place of resistance. It is not still dropping, is it?
Wrong, Aussie. It does not automatically want to drop. Something has to make it want to drop. It doesn't drop automatically, Aussie. There's no force inside of a cup that makes it want to drop, Aussie. It doesn't work that way. Mass doesn't automatically want to drop.
Yes, there is, because if you left it at rest, it would stay at rest. You applied a force to it, and so that when you apply a force, there's an equal and opposite reaction, and that reaction is dropping.
No, Aussie, there's because for there to be an equal and opposite reaction. Aussie, if this is an equal and opposite reaction, me holding this, that means there has to be something going up and something going down, Aussie. What is the thing going down, Aussie? What is the thing I'm resisting against,
going down is
Aussie?
Its own weight.
No.
Weight.
Aussie.
It's heavier than air.
Its own weight doesn't cause it to go down. Because if I put it in a space with no gravity, it'll just sit there. So why is it going down?
It's the relative density. If it was a helium balloon, would it go down? No, because it's not more dense than the air. It would go up.
Electromagnetism
it's relative
is
density. It is such a simple concept that there's no point continuing to argue something if you've got to be that thick about it and you can't get it. Now, try and tell me again about the two types because I missed that.
No. So again, helium balloons, the reason they go up is because there is a more dense thing at the bottom. Density can apply force to an object. If there's a more dense thing, that means there are more molecules that pushes it up. And if there's more molecules at the top, it'll push it down. If there are no molecules, density doesn't push anything. So if they're in a vacuum and there's no molecules, and it still goes down, that means there has to be a force to cause it to go down. If there is no force, there is no movement. So if it moves, that means force necessarily. There's no automatic movement. It seems like you're confused about this, and you think that because it moves, it's just automatic. There's nothing causing the movement. It's just magic. The magic of the object causes it to go down.
But you said it yourself. The helium balloon rises. The helium balloon rises because it's less dense than the air.
Right.
And so it's displacing. The air is displacing the balloon, which causes it to go up. In the case of the object that you're dropping, it is displacing the air, so the air is going up, which creates the illusion of the thing going down, which just happens to go down to a place of resistance.
So why?
And there's no such thing as a vacuum. There's no such thing as a vacuum anyway.
Yes, there is. We can create vacuums all the time. So if we create a vacuum with no particles inside of it and put an object in it, it's not displacing anything. There's no relative density. There is zero density. And why does it still fall?
But we can't create a vacuum.
Yes,
we can create close to a vacuum, but there'll always be some amount of density there.
Good enough. If the molecule's literally not touching the top and the bottom, that's zero density. So zero density, object in it, it falls. Why? Why does it fall? It's not displacing anything. Why does it fall?
It's displacing something.
No, it's not. That's
something
what a vacuum means.
Not unable to resist it.
There's no displacement.
It's a near vacuum. You'll never get a total vacuum anyway.
I don't need a total vacuum. I just need enough of a vacuum that it's not displacing anything. We can create vacuums that the particles are so far away that the object isn't displacing anything. So yes, we can create it where there's zero displacement. It's not displacing any particles at all. Still falls. Why does it still fall, Aussie?
because it has mass, and mass
not an
requires
answer.
resistance.
Mass is not a force, so
To come to
mass
rest.
doesn't go down. Mass is just is not a force. So why
But that's
why does
literally what
mass go down?
gravity is.
Why does
That's
mass go
literally what
down?
you're saying gravity is, because that's where things of mass go. We live in a relative density realm. Everything of
Ozzy,
mass
you can't just say
naturally goes down. There's a universal
No, it
down. It
doesn't.
never falls sideways, does it? Not even in your vacuum,
no.
because it always goes down.
Aussie,
That
you
is
can't
just
say
the first
mass
law of
goes
observation
down.
of any scientific endeavor is to make the observation
Aussie, you have
first
to answer the
and then
question.
come up to the argument.
Why does it go down? Just saying it goes down. Yes, obviously it goes down. Why does it go down?
Because there's nothing dense enough to resist
Ozzy,
it
no.
from
You
dropping
can't.
down.
You have to have a positive number here. So if I say, why does something going at a speed of 7 go at a speed of 7? I can't say because nothing is stopping it. No, you have to say there is an
But you're
initial
going to
force.
do the opposite, though. You're going to assume somebody on the opposite side of the ball, because things aren't dropping down there, they're dropping up. Why are they dropping up? Well, because they're going to the center of mass. But that's never been observed. It's never been tested, never been proven. It's an assumption and a requirement of your spinning spaceball belief that has no evidence, never been seen.
We're talking about gravity. We don't. The globe doesn't matter to gravity.
Resistance beneath them. We can see that. We can scientifically prove it.
To gravity.
Why?
Why do things with mass go down? You can't say they automatically go down. That's not an option. You have to say there is something causing it. What is the thing causing it to go down?
Lack of resistance.
That's not a positive number, Aussie. You can't say if I ask for what is a positive number, like there is a hole. What caused the hole, Aussie? You can't say because there's no resistance. You have to have a positive force. Basic logic. If you want to have an effect, you have to think a cause.
A hole in what? What are you talking about? What hole?
This is an analogy.
Use force to make a hole, like a shovel or something.
If there is a thing, a positive event that occurs in reality, you can't say it occurs because nothing stopped it. Something must have caused it because it wasn't always occurring. So if it can't be always occurring, something must have predated it to cause it to occur. So what caused it to occur, Aussie? It can't have been falling forever, Aussie. So why does mass fall?
No, that's right. The Newton's law says for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So if you don't perform a force in the first place, like picking it up, then it won't drop. If you pick it up and you leave it somewhere where there's nothing to resist it, it drops. It's really, really straightforward stuff. You don't need extraneous forces to describe it. It is just the reaction to the initial force that you placed upon it.
Yes, it's an initial force called gravity. That's why it goes down. You don't get an option there. If it goes down, that's a force. If it moves, that's a force. If there's no movement, then there's no force. So if you're saying it's moving, you're admitting there's a force. So you lose. If you think it's falling,
yeah, well, that's right. If you throw something up in the air,
it
goes up,
wrong
doesn't
force.
it?
Wrong force, Aussie. If something goes down, if anything is going down at all, if anything is ever being pulled down for any reason, that's a force, Aussie. You lose.
I'm getting terrible reception here. I'm struggling to hear you.
If there is anything going down at all, there must be a force to cause it to go down. It can't go down without a force, Aussie. Must have force to cause it to go down. No force, no movement. All movement equals force. You don't get to separate the two. You don't get to say it automatically goes down. Literally,
it's not true. It's just the reaction to a force.
No, Aussie. If there's no force,
if
no
I
movement.
punch a hole in the wall, are you going to say that the wall crumpling then is gravity because it made a hole in the wall?
Yes.
You know, like how is that saying that there's an opposite force to something? When I apply a force to something and create a reaction, the reaction is directly a result of the force applied. So if you pick something up, that's the force applied. The reaction is dropping. There's no extra force applied to cause it to drop, just as there's no extra force to make the hole in the wall if you put enough force from your fist in the first place. It's as simple as that. Whatever force you apply, there will be an equal and opposite reaction.
I already debunked your nonsense there, Aussie. If an object is moving, that's a force. There has to be a force to cause the movement. So if an object is falling for any reason ever, there is a force causing the falling. Resistance doesn't cause the falling, Aussie.
No, it's throwing it up in the air in the first place.
Nope.
It's just a reaction.
Nope.
It's just a natural reaction
to
applying a force
Wrong,
If you
Aussie.
left it alone in the first place, if you didn't apply a force, it's not going to drop, is it?
Wrong, Aussie. If I throw an object up, I'm applying a force upwards. There has to be something else to cause it to come down. A different force. Another force, Aussie. Basic logic. If you throw an object
yeah,
up, if you
air
apply
resistance.
a force up, then there has to be something to cause it to go down,
Yes.
Aussie.
Well, why don't you listen then? That force is relative density because
No,
the
it's
object
not.
is more dense than the air, and so it will move through the air and come back down.
I already disproved that, Aussie, because if we throw it up in a vacuum, guess
You
what?
didn't
It
disprove the
still
damn
comes
thing.
down. If we throw it up in a vacuum, it
That's
still
right.
comes down. No density. There's no
Because the
density in a
vacuum is a
vacuum.
total lack of resistance.
It is a
A
total lack of
resistance
resistance.
doesn't give more resistance than a lot of resistance, is it?
What?
Yeah,
Aussie,
it's really,
Aussie, if
really
it's a vacuum,
straightforward.
nothing is pushing it down. There is no relative density to push it down in a vacuum.
That's
Doesn't exist.
right.
So
That's
nothing's
right.
pushing it down. Can't go down without a
That's
force.
right. It's got its own
That's right.
mass.
Gravity exists.
And it's more
That's
dense
right.
than
You've
the surrounding
admitted I'm right.
medium of nothing. It's more dense than the surrounding medium of nothing. That's why it will come down until resisted by something of sufficient density to resist it, and it comes to rest.
No, Aussie. If there's no density on the top and there's no density on the bottom, nothing. It's not going to push it up and it's not going to push it down. Basic logic here, Aussie. For density to work, it has to be more dense on one side and less dense on the other side. It can't move anything if it's equally dense on both sides. If you have something equally dense on both sides, it will not move. That's how density works. You understand how density
Does your
works, right?
vacuum chamber have dense walls? Does your vacuum chamber have a dense
apply
walls? Does it have a
no
floor and a
density.
ceiling to it?
The walls are not a gas. They don't apply
Yes,
any
but the
force.
walls and floor exist.
Walls and floors exist. If walls
you
and
couldn't have
floors
your vacuum
don't
without your vacuum
apply
chamber,
a
could you?
force to an object in them, that's what the point of a vacuum is. If the walls applied the forces in a vacuum, it wouldn't be a vacuum, Ozzy. It'd be filled with the walls. That's not how a vacuum works, Ozzy.
So the universe without walls, being a giant vacuum, how do we have an atmosphere on Earth?
Gravity and electromagnetism, the forces that pull
Ah.
things together. Yes.
So gravity is electromagnetism now, and it pulls on air.
Gravity does pull on air. Yes. Electromagnetism also pulls on air.
So why is the air up? Why is the air up then? Why isn't it all on the ground?
Because electromagnetism causes the bigger things to be pulled together harder.
Well, how come I can get a straw, stick it in a glass of water, put my finger over the top, and lift the straw up out of the water, and the water doesn't fall back down? A tiny little vacuum, closest to the center of gravity, can beat gravity. Little vacuum
because
force.
of
So
the
you can
strong
say the
electromagnetic
universal
force.
vacuum force
That's
isn't
because
strong enough to pull all the air off the Earth.
that's because of the strong electromagnetic force. It's 40 orders of magnitude stronger than gravity. This is very easy, basic stuff, Ozzy.
Strong electromagnetic force of my finger.
No, it's the strong electromagnetic force of the universe, which also applies to the particles in your finger.
Okay, so if I get a vacuum hose and I start drawing some water out, I can lift it up over the roof of a building. As long as I put the other end lower than the water source on the other side of the building, that water is going to flow all the way up the hose and come out the other side. That's another example of a vacuum force being way, way stronger than gravity, which has no say in the matter. That water will forcefully flow out until it's all lower than the outer end. How do you explain gravity?
You can jump, Ozzy.
That?
Like, it's easier. You can just jump up and down. You can use the strong and weak electromagnetic force to tense in your muscles and then go up above, fight gravity. So gravity is 40 orders of magnitude weaker than the strong and weak electromagnetic force. So obviously you can use those to overcome gravity. That's why rockets work.
Okay, so you can admit then that a very tiny vacuum force is multiple times stronger than gravity, and yet you were saying that tiny little air molecules with virtually zero mass can be miles and miles up in the air, and gravity is still going to override the universal force of a vacuum with its really, really, really weak force as it hurtles millions of miles an hour through the vacuum of space.
No. So dark energy means that the energy vacuum is actually overcoming gravity. It's pushing things further away than gravity. So the opposite of what you said. But yes, gravity can still pull things in from long distances.
But an air molecule has virtually zero mass. Like, yeah, it's like probably 0.00001 grams of mass, if that, even less.
That's
so
still mass.
if gravity is a force of attraction, an electromagnetic attraction to something that's virtually non-existent, then how the heck can we be hurtling through a vacuum of space and still have an atmosphere?
Because vacuums don't apply forces, so vacuums wouldn't push anything away. Like vacuums apply zero force to anything in any direction.
I don't know if I'm breaking up to you, but you're breaking up a lot to me. I'm struggling to hear what you're saying here.
Vacuums don't apply a force, so traveling through a vacuum wouldn't cause the air molecules to move away. Gravity does apply a force, so it causes things to pull together. And so the non-force of a vacuum would not stop air from being pulled by the actual force of gravity.
But we've just demonstrated how easily a tiny vacuum force can overcome gravity where gravity's strongest.
There is no
and you're
vacuum
trying to say
force.
now that where gravity's weakest, it gets even stronger again than a vacuum, which is massive force, as opposed to the tiny little one of a simple siphon hose.
What do you, there's no vacuum force. What vacuum force are you talking about? There is no vacuum force.
In a siphon is a vacuum force. You've removed the air from it, and so you've got the water molecules flowing through a closed pipe or hose, and you can lift it up as much as 8 stories over a building. And the water will flow because water's so strongly wanting to seek its level. And as long as you don't get any air bubbles in that hose, then gravity has no say in the matter. If you take it up too high, I think about 18 stories, the water will even start to boil because water needs pressure.
That's not a vacuum.
Without the pressure, a natural pressurized environment, your little gravity is weak, it does nothing, and it cannot hold an atmosphere to a ball spinning through a vacuum of space.
So when you like put your finger on a straw and hold up water, the vacuum is doing nothing. There is no vacuum force. It is the air around the straw that is pushing the water. There is no vacuum force. So if space is a vacuum, it applies zero force. There's no force that applies at all. The thing that does apply a force is the particles, the density that you're talking about, that applies a force, but it stops at the vacuum. When there's a vacuum, it stops applying a force. There is no longer applying a force once you get to the vacuum. So it's not a problem that we're in space covered with particles and the particles hold themselves together and are pulled by gravity, because they can only push out where the edge of the particles are. Because when the particles stop and there's vacuum, they can no longer push anything. They're not able to push anymore because they can only push as far as they're touching one another.
Yeah, I'm sorry I'm having such poor reception here because you keep breaking up so much. It's almost impossible for me to hear what you're saying here.
Okay.
I think I've demonstrated that a vacuum force of a simple siphon is way, way stronger than gravity. And that's just a very simple vacuum force. It's a very tiny one.
There's no such thing.
To say that the universal vacuum is weaker than a hose, that's the most insane thing ever.
Again, Aussie, there's no such thing as a vacuum force. There is the force of other particles pushing. So if you create a vacuum on one side of a straw, the vacuum does nothing. The vacuum is not a force. The other particles are pushing the water from the other side. It's not, the vacuum does nothing. So the vacuum doesn't just pull because of vacuum. That's not how it works. That would violate your silly gravity principle of everything falls. If that happened, it would literally prove your own theory wrong if that happened. So the fact that one particle will push another particle because they're bumping into one another stops when there's no more particles. If there's no more particles, they can't keep pushing. It doesn't work that way. That means there's something else. If something is pulling and there's nothing else pushing, that means it's going to come collect into a gigantic ball called Earth.
Okay, well, we can attribute that pushing force, if I'm assuming you finished there, yep. We can attribute that pushing force simply to the mass of its own existence, because we're not hurtling through a vacuum of space. If we say that atmospheric gases have some amount of mass, then they have some amount of weight, which is what gives us, air pressure, then that works totally perfectly fine on a stationary plane of Earth with a direct downward force only. And therefore that air pressure could be pushing on the water of the higher side, even to the point where the water itself is only this high on one side, but it's still going to flow all the way over that 8 stories, if you want, or whatever many stories of building to get to the other side, because that's water seeking its own level And it's going to do so because of the vacuum force created in the hose. As soon as you get a bubble of air in there, you've lost the vacuum force, and the water won't be seeking its level through that massive hose, through that amount of height, against the force of gravity. So it just proves that a vacuum force is indeed way, way stronger than gravity. And we can have pressure because we're not contained by a vacuum. Like I said, if you've got the helium balloon stuck to the ceiling without the balloon, it makes no sense. But we've got the whole atmosphere stuck to the ceiling of the sky without a balloon. It makes no sense. We can't have it. You can't have a pressurized atmosphere in a vacuum.
So you've debunked your own silly position, Aussie. So if a vacuum force is a thing, why doesn't the water fall? So like you have a straw and you have like your finger on the straw and there's water in it. Why doesn't it fall? Why doesn't the water fall out of the straw when you hold it up?
We might have to do this another day. I'm not even getting anything from you here, sorry. I live in a pretty poor reception area here with internet, so I'll get my dongle and bring it close.
I turned him up all the way. I turned him up all the way.
Can you hear me all right, Kaz?
I can hear you just fine. I'm going to mute myself and him. Let's see if you can say something and then he can hear it now.
Well, I don't know if he's back at the TV yet.
See if you can hear you now.
Aussie, can you hear Kaz all right?
Can you hear me okay?
He's frozen.
Yeah, he is. Frozen as hell. Ladies and gentlemen, just letting you know that we are having some technical difficulties at the moment with Iron Horse, so hopefully he'll be back in a moment. If not, I don't know what we'll do. I guess we'll just read the super chats that are for TJump and go from there. In any event, I want to let you know that both of our guests are linked in the description, along with after show if that happens. And also want to let you know that super chats will go to the top of the list. And please tag me at Modern Day Debates. Attack the argument and not the person. Insults will not be read. I don't know what I should do. Maybe I should kick him out and then see if he can come back in. Aussie, can you hear me? God damn. Leave and come back. I'm going to try to kick him out and see if he can come back in.
I think he's already been kicked out. Like,
yeah, maybe.
His computer probably just doesn't recognize it. But I think it should be okay to insult James. Like, I think that should be totally okay. Send super chats to make fun of James.
Oh, man. Well, I wouldn't do that today. Not this week. Maybe next month.
It's a good point.
Yeah. He's not sending me an email or anything. Let's see. We'll give him a few more minutes. I don't know. You want to... He's not here to defend himself. Anything going on for you in the future? Oh, here he is. He's back. Maybe. Are you there, Iron Horse? Somebody else is here, also named Iron Horse.
Probably double joined.
Yeah. TJump is about to get double teamed by 2 Flat Earth Aussies, so this is going to be a bloodbath, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, I don't know. Yep, I hear you. I hear something.
I'm back again.
I hear you. Yes, you're back.
Ah, cool.
Testing. Can you hear us now?
Yeah, you actually sound a little bit louder too. This is much better.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. So you were talking about the vacuum power, the vacuum energy. So let's say you have a straw, it's full of water, and you're holding it up with your finger. Now, if stuff automatically falls like you think it does, why doesn't the water fall out of the straw?
Because you've created a vacuum force to prevent it, haven't you? That's the power of a vacuum, and it's only a tiny little vacuum. That gravity has no say in it. So
the vacuum's
according
on
to
the
gravity,
top, right? The vacuum's on the top of the straw, right?
Well, it's at the top end, yeah.
And what's on the bottom end?
Yeah, your water.
Yes, and the air below the water, right?
Well, yes,
Okay, so why is the water not falling through the air?
because gravity doesn't exist. It's a myth. You've got a vacuum force holding it up.
It doesn't matter if gravity exists. Something has to stop it from falling. Why is it not falling? Something has to like hold it up
The
from the
force
bottom.
of the vacuum held by your finger. As soon as you release that vacuum force, it does drop, doesn't it? So there's no gravity involved. There's a vacuum force overriding any possible hope or thought of any amount of gravity whatsoever.
So the
It
vacuum
shows
at
that
the
the
top.
vacuum is a force.
So the vacuum at the top of the straw is touching the water at the bottom of the straw?
It's what's holding it in, because the water itself, being a fluid, has no air passing through it, and so it creates its own vacuum force itself. That's one of the properties of fluids.
What? That makes absolutely no sense. So we have a vacuum at the top and the vacuum touches the water, but the water is different. It's not a vacuum. The water is not a vacuum. And then below the water is the air. Now, the way a classical rational person thinks is that the air on the outside of the straw is pushing up against the water, holding it in the straw. The vacuum is doing none of that. The vacuum is just there, and then the water is pushing up against the vacuum, and then the air
So
is
you're saying
holding
that
the water.
Air is anti-gravity now. It's holding water up.
Yes.
Is that why clouds?
Yes. So if there's a vacuum and then water and then air,
No,
the air
it's because
is.
you've created a vacuum seal inside the top of the straw that the water's own weight pulling against that creates enough of a suction to prevent it falling any further, which is why if you release your finger, it falls back out because of the relative density. So it just shows that that tiny little vacuum force can override gravity just in front of your face, that you can do it in the bloody cafe or at your kitchen table or whatever. It's something that anybody can prove to show that gravity is non-existent. It's not needed to explain the observations of pressure gradients, vacuum forces, and fluid dynamics.
So how does the vacuum at the top of the straw reach down to the bottom of the straw where there isn't a vacuum?
It doesn't. The water creates its own plug. It pulls against the top of your finger where it can no longer create the air to allow it to pass out. And so that little vacuum force that it creates holds itself in.
So the vacuum somehow makes the water magnetic so it attracts itself. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. I just said you've made a tiny little vacuum force which overrides any concept of gravity because of water's own density. Nothing magnetic. Water's not magnetic. In fact, if anything, it's diamagnetic. In fact, everything is diamagnetic, which I'd love to see if you could ever get around to addressing the tides and how gravity can pull trillions of tons of water around for 2 tides a day.
I addressed that before. It pulls half of it, and the first half creates a big hole, and the water tries to fill the big hole, and that's how I have a second one. It's pretty easy. It's like
So
if you
water
create a
filling
wave.
a big hole creates a big bulge.
Yes, that's how waves work. Yeah, if you create, like, if a meteor hits the water, first it pushes stuff away, and then the water tries to fill the hole. Yes.
So gravity's a meteor.
No. So
If the moon had enough gravity to pull the oceans to one side of the Earth,
yeah,
it would create a massive low tide on the other side and a massive high tide on the moon side, and they'd get one per day for 24 hours only. You would not get a second high tide on the rear side because you've got Earth's gravity working with the moon's gravity, pulling all the ocean towards the moon side. How can you possibly have the moon overriding Earth's gravity when it's a sixth of Earth's gravity and creating a secondary high tide on the rear side? It's just physically impossible if you apply just the simplest bit of logic to it. There's no way you can use gravity to explain tides at all. A diamagnetic force you can, because it's a repellent force and it can push water around. And then the water rebounding can create a secondary high tide back the other way.
No, it's pretty simple. So like if you have a like say a bathtub and you put your hand in the middle of the bathtub and then you push your hand, you're going to have a big ball of water here and a big trough of water here, right?
Yeah.
And then the big trough is going to be filled by the water over here. This water is going to like fill the trough, right?
Actually, no. Fluid dynamics makes the whole wave go and hit this back end of the bath, and then when it flows back, it will fill that trough. It's not going to fill that trough with another wave. You're going to create one wave with your hand, not a second wave to fill the trough. The water will rebound off the side of the bathtub.
So the water behind your hand will just stay there. It won't fill the giant hole you've created. The hole's just going to remain there, and the water isn't going to fall into the hole until the first wave.
I just told you it will bounce back. It will bounce back from the other edge. It'll slosh backwards and forwards, and that's a tiny example just in a bathtub. We're talking about
let's say we're in the ocean. If I'm in the ocean and I put my hand in the ocean and I make a wave, you're saying the big hole that I just made will never be filled until the wave hits the other side of the Atlantic and comes back?
It's no comparison. It's no comparison. What you're going to do to the water is nothing. The water will just instantly find its own level. It's not going to create another wave to fill that trough. It's just going to fill it up. It's no comparison whatsoever. In a small environment of a bathtub.
How does it fill it up? It moves, right? The water, when you create like a hole, it moves.
Fluid dynamics means water will always seek and find its own level.
So when water moves, what do we call that?
Flowing.
A wave. We call it a wave.
You could call some of it a wave, but it's not necessarily always a wave.
So if I put my
hand, a river is a wave. Is a river a wave?
If you make a displacement,
no, it's just water flowing.
So if I put my hand in water and I push the water, there's going to be a wave in the front where the water has been moved, and there's going to be a wave in the back to fill the first wave, right?
Not necessarily a wave, just water naturally finding its level. And there's no way that you can
Aussie, if you want to call it water finding its level, that's the second tide. That's how it works. Congratulations.
Okay. Tell me then how the moon is anything like a hand pushing through water. You're saying that the gravity is pulling water.
Yes. So it's a big thing that pulls the water in one direction, like my hand pushes the water in one direction. It's a force.
Well, that would create the second tide right behind it, wouldn't it? That'd create just one wave and another wave, and you got your two tides in 5 minutes.
No.
But you don't have two tides in 5 minutes. You have them 12 and a half hours apart.
Right. So the size of the wave is determined by the amount of water you move. The more water you move, the longer it takes for the water to fill the hole,
ludicrous.
Right?
Tides don't move in one single wave. They gradually rise over a period of 6 hours, and they gradually go down over a period of another 6 hours, and then they go back up again over another 6 hours. There's no such thing as a tidal wave creating the tides in one big burst and then having a low tide in between as a next wave comes and hits.
So imagine the ultimate big sky daddy puts his hand in all of the waters on the earth and just moves all of the waters. How long would it take the water to naturally flow to fill in the first half that the God moved the waters?
5 minutes, if that. 2 minutes.
Okay.
Assuming the sky daddy that you're talking about, is bigger than the moon.
Yes. So ultimate sky daddy, super God, decides to put his hand in the middle of the earth and move half of the water to like one edge. And we want to know how fast the water on the other side is going to fill the hole the sky daddy's hand left. And you think it's going to cover the entire half of the earth in 5 minutes?
Yeah, I think it's going to actually flood the entire world in 5 minutes. It's just, I don't know where you come up with these hypothetical things from anyway in the first place. Like, how about we just leave your mythical sky daddies out of it altogether and just deal with reality as we observe it. And let's talk about what really happens. Not this magical if somebody with a big hand comes and moves half the ocean at once. If you get a big wave, the next wave will be following right behind it, and it's usually generally even bigger. Waves come in sets created by swell, which is created by winds out in the deep ocean. So it's got nothing to do with the tides. Tides are a completely different thing of water sloshing backwards and forwards from the weak diamagnetic repellent force of the moon, taking 24 hours and 50 minutes to go around us once, which will create two tides as it hits the coast on one side. Then as the moon passes over, it's also pushing it back again, creating that backflow that you're talking about. And so when it goes back all the way across the ocean, that's where you get your secondary high tide. And by the time it comes around again, we'll start pushing the first one back again.
Okay, let's talk about reality, like in what's actually there. What's a tsunami? What is a tsunami?
Tsunami is generally a wave created by an earthquake underwater and displaces a large body of water very quickly.
Let's say we have a tsunami instead of a giant hand, because you want real things. So a tsunami moves a large portion of the water. Does the water automatically get refilled in 5 minutes?
It creates a massive flood depending on where it hits.
Yes.
And then it slowly recedes again.
Behind the tsunami, does it take 5 minutes for the rest of the world's ocean to fill the giant hole the tsunami has left?
No, because the same water goes back and fills back where it came from, like it does in the bathtub.
Right. It takes longer. It doesn't work like that. You create a giant hole in the ocean because the tsunami pulls the water out of the ocean. It takes quite a long time for the water to move and fill that, because water doesn't go at the speed of light like you think it does. It actually takes some time, because of how physics works, for the water to actually spread.
That's got nothing to do with tide, though, does it?
Yes, it does.
That's got a physical effect of something happening to displace a large amount of water very quickly, and then that water receding is nothing like a tide. So, comparing tsunamis with everyday tides, which we get 2 of every day, it's no comparison.
The first half of what you said, we have a thing that displaces a large amount of water. That's called the moon and gravity. So it displaces a large amount of water in one direction, and it keeps going. It doesn't stop. Like tsunamis stop, and then the water goes back. But if it kept going, just imagine a tsunami that continued to go and continued to pull the water all the way across. There's going to be one wave where the tsunami is, where it has a large, big ball of water that it's brought. And then it's going to have a big empty space where it brought the water from. And then there's going to be a wave behind that that is coming to fill in all of the empty space the tsunami left. So if there's this one gigantic tsunami that doesn't stop and it continues to pull water all the way around the world and goes in one clockwise direction around the world, there's going to be 2 waves. There's going to be one at the tsunami, and there's going to be a second one filling in the hole the tsunami left. You have 2 waves, right?
Well, there's a huge problem with that, because first of all, we've got continents. About 30% of the Earth is covered with continents, and that stops the water from flowing in a wave. Even if it's a tsunami might be compared to an extra large tide momentarily in some places, but it's still going to flow back the way it came. It's not going to be filled in by another wave coming, because if it kept on going, we wouldn't have land masses. Land masses are measurably above sea level, and that's what stops everything from getting flooded all the time. If you were looking at it on your globe, then everywhere is below the curvature of this massive mountain of ocean in the middle of 2 continents, and so they'd be below sea level. It's just simple observable logics. You have to bring in gravity to make the impossible possible. And that's why the globe is such a ridiculous concept, because without it, we can explain everything in physics without gravity. We can explain it all. We don't need it. But without it, your globe is dead. It's gone. It's nothing. It's ridiculous. You wouldn't even have water in a universe, in a universal vacuum. There would be no pressure, because it'd just boil. You put water into a vacuum chamber, what does it do? It boils.
Okay, so let's say when a tsunami forms, it's going to go to land. But so there's America is here, tsunami's here, and then there are some ships over here. What happens to these ships? Do they get pulled in towards the tsunami?
If they're in deep water, they just go up and over. The tsunami passes straight under it.
No. So tsunami's going towards America, and they're on the other side. So they're behind the tsunami. Do they get pulled in towards the tsunami while the tsunami is moving towards America?
No, that's not how waves work in deep water.
So the tsunami takes a large amount of water and moves it, creating a deficit, less water here. And the ships right next to them, they don't like move. It doesn't like pull them because there's more water moving towards the land.
I don't know if you listened to my introduction where I mentioned how I've spent years and years surfing. And so as a surfer, I learned a lot about the way waves work in the ocean. The wave itself doesn't really even exist, except there's a ripple in the water. It passes from one part of the water to another. So it moves, but the water remains where it is. So if there's a boat sitting there, well, the wave goes under it and keeps on going. It's only when they reach shallow water that they start to pick up extra water and start to then break, which creates, the waves that surfers are looking for. But in the deep ocean, that's not how waves work at all. They basically, for all intents and purposes, don't exist. except that they ripple. But the water that it passes through stays where it was. So it's not really moving like the tsunami you say it is. It's only when it reaches shallow water that the fluid dynamics then pick up surrounding water and pick up speed and momentum, and then it can create the disaster that it creates.
Yeah. So it does that. So it does that.
Relatively mellow little rising and falling.
So it picks up the water, lifts it out of the ocean, puts it on the land. Then there's a big hole in the ocean. There's no water there. The rest of the water behind it fill that in. So it creates a double wave. In every tsunami, there are multiple waves that happen. The first one is the initial one with the big wave. Then a second one comes, which is the water from behind it coming in. And then they both go out. So when you create a gigantic hole in the ocean, when you remove the water that was behind it comes after it to fill the hole. Aussie, this is just basic logic. You can do it in your bathtub. I don't know how you don't understand this. If you create a gigantic hole in the ocean, the water behind it is going to fill that hole, and that's called a wave. That's the tides, Aussie. It's very, very simple.
No, that's actually not a hole. It's called a trough. That's a trough between the waves.
Oh my God.
It's not a hole. And the next wave that comes along doesn't fill the hole at all. It's just waves moving through deep water. That's not the tides at all. The tides are very much a coastal phenomenon. You wouldn't even notice them at deep sea except for where you've got shallow rocks, because that's all it really affects. In the open ocean, there's no such thing as tides. Not that mean anything to anybody anyway. It's the coastal areas where you have the rise and fall in the shallow waters that has effects over things. So to say that even a tsunami moving through deep water, it is not going to create a second wave from it. It might have extra effects from whatever caused the first tsunami, and you might get more waves from it. That's completely plausible. Most of these waves do move in sets, but they certainly do not create holes, and they certainly do not try and fill the hole. You've just got a trough between waves, and all the waves will move constant distance apart from one another until reaching the shallow water, where they build up the momentum and do all the damage.
Can you show Kaz, can you show my screen? I have like a picture of how tsunami works. Yeah. So Aussie, what are these? These are all, there's like a hole. This is a trough here, right? The part under the little dotted line, those are troughs, right?
I guess you could say that, but they're totally unrealistic.
Okay, that's good enough. So what happens to this big ass wave over here if there's a trough? Is it going to move to fill the trough, Aussie? Because water wants to reach its level, right, Aussie? So if there's a big trough here and this water's going to the land, is this big wave going to fill that trough? Is it going to move over there?
Yeah, that's...
Oh my God, waves. That's the tides, Aussie. You've done it. You figured out the tides.
It's not tides, that's swell.
Yes, that's what the tides are. That's the second tide. That's the tide on the other side. That's what it's doing.
No. Swell and tides are completely different things. They bear some resemblance to each other in certain local locations, but to say that waves are the tides is ridiculous. You've got no idea what you're talking about. We're talking about a 6.25 hour difference between the first high tide and the second high tide. How can a wave coming a minute or 30 seconds afterwards possibly be an explanation for tides? That's ridiculous.
Do bigger waves move slower, Aussie?
What's that?
Bigger waves.
Do bigger waves move slower?
If the wave is bigger, does it create a larger wavelength between the next wave?
I guess you could say so, yeah.
So if you have a really, really big wave, then you're going to have a really, really big trough, and it's going to take a longer time to fill the trough, isn't it, Aussie?
But it's not going to take a quarter of a day. It's just not how it works.
If the
You're trying to say that one wave is the high tide, then the wave recedes immediately. That's not going to create a low tide immediately for the next 6 hours.
If the bigger
and then
the
another
wave,
comes in
the
6
longer
hours
the
later
trough. If the bigger the wave, the longer the trough. If you get a big enough wave, yes, you'll get a 6 hour trough. Congratulations. It's just basic physics.
You're insane, mate, if that's what you think. You're absolutely insane. You've got no ocean experience whatsoever. You've probably never ridden a surfboard in your life. You've got no idea how waves work, no idea how tides work. I've spent years of my life, decades, observing tides. I've watched a high tide creeping up across dry sand as the moon is far into the east, still approaching. This is the major high tide of the day because the secondary high tide doesn't wet the dry sand. It only comes up a certain amount of period up the dry sand or that's already been saturated. So when you've got water creeping up the unsaturated sand, that's the major high tide of the day, and that's with the moon hours away. It's not going to be 4 or 5 hours until it's overhead, by which stage that tide is already receding and on its way well out again. So it cannot be the moon pulling it from hours away to the east when it's obviously repelling it and pushing it forwards in front of it, and by the time it's overhead, it's nearly low tide.
So you may have spent
personal
years
experience.
watching the waves. I have spent years watching flat earthers and debaters who don't understand anything on debates, and I can tell. And based on your logic, I should understand more about flat earthers than anybody because I've spent years watching them talk. Clearly, that's not the case. You spending years watching waves is like me spending years watching flat earthers. It's still a mystery of how either one.
Not at all, no, because this is a natural phenomenon in nature. This is really almost extraneous to both either the flat earth or the globe earth argument, except to say it's completely just related to tides alone. It's real world experience. You've got lounge room experience, classroom experience, book learning experience. I've been out in the real world experiencing it in real time, revolving my whole life around how the tides work, how the swells work, what I'm going to do for the day, where the moon is, whether I mow the lawn because of the moon phase or do I do some weeding or whatever. I do everything according to moon phases and observation of tides, which I've done for decades and decades of real time, real world experience. And I can tell you that, you know, I used to be a die-in-the-wool heliocentrist myself. I believed everything about it, and yet all my observations of the moon didn't match. They don't match the mainstream belief. Even watching a lunar eclipse, the shadow comes from the completely wrong side and angle. It cannot possibly be attributed to the sun being beneath the spinning ball Earth, casting a shadow on the moon. It's absolutely absurd. Everything about heliocentrism that I've seen firsthand is why I'm a flat earther. Not because I've been sitting watching stuff and debates, you know, on YouTube all the time, but because I've got real world, real life experience, decades of it, out in reality. And so I know what I'm talking about. And I know
everyone
that
has
your
that
version of tides caused by the pull of the moon is impossible.
Everyone who's older than 24 has decades of experience in reality. That's just basic logic. And obviously it's a natural phenomenon in nature. Clearly that's the case. Flirfs are also a natural phenomenon. There's nothing supernatural about them. Literally nothing you said makes sense. I'm ready to go to the Q&A.
All right. Are you ready to go to Iron Horse?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we do have some room for super chat still. So if you do have a question for one of tonight's debaters, go ahead and send a super chat still. We do have room for that at this time. And I'll go ahead and let the timer run down for the open discussion before I switch to the Q&A timer, just to let that happen. And we'll go ahead and start that now. So our first question comes in from Space is a lie for $5. They say, just because you don't fall off the planet living in Australia does not mean Earth is flat. I think that's for you, Flat Earth Aussie. Did you hear me?
Well, that's right, because when we live on a stationary planet Earth, we have a universal up and down, and you can't fall off anything when all the solid stuff's beneath you.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. Oh, yeah. I want to let you know, everybody in the chat, that to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button for more debates. Our debaters are linked in the description below. So if you like what you heard tonight and you want to hear more from either of them, please don't forget to check out their links, because we do appreciate them. They are the lifeblood of this channel. And again, there will be a after show tonight. So if you want to hear more from either of them tonight, I believe they will both be joining us for that in the after show. That is also linked in the description. And with that, let's go ahead and kick it to the next super chat from Oflamio for $2. They say, for both. I'm hearing myself probably.
Aussie, his thing.
From Oflamio for $2 for both. Can curvature cause a force?
Can curvature cause a force? No. Curvature is just a shape as a result of a force. Curvature can't cause a force, I don't think.
Okay. Iron Horse has stepped up for a moment. We'll move on. From Mark Reed for $5 asks, why down in Iron Horse, did you want to answer that last question? Can curvature cause a force?
I'm having trouble hearing you again, mate. You're sounding real staticky to me. I'm just trying to think where I might have some headphones, but I can't think.
Can curvature cause a force?
I'm just getting started.
Try put it in the chat. Like type it in the chat.
Yeah. Okay, I'll type that and I'll ask the next question while I'm doing that. I can copy and paste it actually while I ask the next question. Mark Reed for $5. Why down in? I shouldn't. I'm going to type that one as well. I'll just copy and paste that to him so he can read that. And let me see. Crawdaddy 29 says, I thought Australia had better education. You hear me, Iron Horse?
I'm just getting static.
Okay. Here's the next question for you. Can you see that?
Can you chat? Can you see the chat in the text chat, Aussie?
No, I'm only looking at it on the app.
On the
close the app,
on the StreamYard, there's a question for you.
In the
That's
app,
a bit clear.
in the app, there should be a comments option. Like there should be a box that says
on the right.
Why down in particular air is just as dense above and to the sides of an object. Because even the air above doesn't offer resistance, does it? It's the same resistance below. So sort of typical.
Can you hear me?
Reed. Yeah, I can now.
Okay, there's a question from Mark Reed for $5. Why down in particular, Iron Horse, the air is just as dense above as to the sides of an object?
I think he just
Why
answered
is
that.
down? Oh, he did?
Yeah, I think he was literally just answering that question.
Okay. Yeah, I did, but if I cut out.
That's fine. I wasn't sure if you did. I couldn't make out what you were saying. I'm sorry. The Crawdaddy 029 for $2. I thought Australia. No, I'm sorry. From Joe Schwartz 199. What is your favorite video game and why?
Ninja Gaiden Sigma 2 because it is extremely difficult and skill based, no grinding.
Iron Horse, do you have a favorite video game?
No, I gave up playing video games about 20 years ago.
All right. From Oflamio Gotcha. Oflamio for $2. What is the definition of force and hoax?
Who's that for?
I think that's for you.
What is the definition of force?
And hoax. I think I could go both ways.
Force and hoax. Well, force is when you apply energy towards something, and hoax is when you believe in something that isn't true.
Yeah, a force is something that applies energy to something. And a hoax is a false statement that is positioned as true.
I don't see it, Crawdaddy. Retype it and I will grab it. Even if you don't have to resend it as a super chat. Just retype it.
Mine has a question for Aussie. Do you have a son named Mango? From Jody W.
No, my son's name is not Mango.
All right. For $5.99 from Anton Gomez says, T-Jump, gravity is not a force. It's 100% illusion. I love you, but you are bananas.
Well, technically, it's just the curvature of space-time, which is not technically defined as a force, but it's definitely a real object that exists, for sure. That's been proven to exist. There's novel testable predictions that have been confirmed in a lab through the LIGO measurements.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. From Jacob McKenzie for $5 says, a wise Tom heeds the chair's instruction, but a mocker does not listen to rebuke. Recliner 1512.
The Church of the Chair, the Bible of the Chair, Book of the Chair.
Gotcha. From Mr. Monster for $5. What good reason would educated scientists have to fake the truth about gravity? If gravity is not true, why is it not mainstream? Why is that not mainstream? Sorry. Why is it not mainstream that gravity is not true?
For me, well, I think it is pretty well mainstream. Like,
No,
The
he's
mainstream will
asking
even
why isn't it the mainstream opinion that gravity is fake?
well they will readily admit that it's not a force, and yet they have to think of it as a force. It's a requirement or a belief that they've carried over from hundreds of years ago to make the Earth a spinning ball when we've got absolutely no way to detect any of the motions, which are incredibly huge motions. And so they just need to have it, even though they know it's just a theory that doesn't really make sense and they haven't got a bloody clue what it is.
Okay, thank you so much. This is the comment, I believe, from Crawdaddy that we missed. Iron Horse, find a playground, get on the merry-go-round, and do one spin over the course of 24 hours and tell me how thrilling the ride is.
Yeah, well, that's a lovely example of people that live in a world of ignorance. Because if we're going to make this merry-go-round even close to resembling reality, we've got to have it with a radius from the center to the outside horse that you're riding on of 4,000 miles. And you've also got to have it sitting on the back of a truck, for example, or something, a supersonic jet, where this jet is flying through across the ground at about 66,600 miles per hour. Now, I can assure you that even without being on the back of a truck, if it's just moving once per day at the end of a 4,000-mile radius, you are going 1.35 times the speed of sound, and you'd better hope you're wearing your Superman cape and a good hard hat.
Angular velocity is the same no matter what distance you're going at, so it doesn't change if you're like a foot away from the center or 1,000 miles away from the center. The angular velocity is the
Okay, well,
same.
put a clock in the middle of a paddock and take the clock face off it and put a length of wire across to the hour hand and start extending that wire out just for 1 kilometre and see how fast you have to run to keep up with the clock. It's a ridiculous example to say that revolutions per minute are anything to do with angular velocity.
If the air is moving with you, you don't have to move at all. Everything will be moving with you, so you won't have to do anything.
But you've got to move with the hour hand. You know, we're talking 4,000 miles long. Can you even grasp the concept of something 4,000 miles long?
If
you can't even grasp something 1 mile long when it comes to a piece of wire sticking out.
If the ground and air are moving with you, you could just hold the hand and you won't have to move at all. You will feel nothing. You'll just stand there.
I'm sorry, for my own personal,
but it is moving.
For my own personal edification, I guess I missed it. What's 4,000 miles long?
Clock hand. So he's saying if there's a clock and it's 4,000 mile long hand and you're at the edge of the hand and you're trying to like hold on to it while it's moving.
But why does it have to be 4,000 miles?
It's just he's trying to make an analogy that if there's a clock hand and it's moving and it's 4,000 miles long, if you were trying to hold on to it, it would move very, very fast and you'd get blown away by the wind. So like if you're standing on the edge of a very long clock hand and it's moving, the edge is moving just like the center is moving. Okay. How would you be able to stand on it?
Okay, I was just trying to understand. Thank you so much. Okay? Thank you. All right, let's move on. From John H for $5. If Earth was a globe and we observed 12 noon facing the sun, 6 months later we would be facing the other way. Please explain. Oh, I think he's frozen. Crap. Hold on.
Oh,
we got him another one. Here we go. You there?
Yeah, I hit the back button and closed the window. I thought that would happen if I tried to hit anything on the phone. I'd lose it.
All right, John H for $5 says, if the Earth was a globe, we observe 12 noon facing the sun, 6 months later we would be facing the other way. Please explain.
Yeah, that's 100% truth. I think that's actually a question for T-Jump to try and explain that one. I would explain it by, if you had a big wall and you had 365 clocks, forget the quarter for the moment, we'll just put 365 of them in a big circle on the wall, and right in the middle you put a big blinding light that was mimicking the sun. So everywhere where it's hitting each individual clock, that is the representation of that particular day of the year's daytime, because the clock is always going to have the 12 at the top. So that's their daylight hours. So if you've got 12 o'clock at the very top clock and 12 o'clock at the very bottom clock, then that one's going to be facing the sun at midday, but this one's going to be facing it at midnight. And so yes, day and night would indeed swap places if we were actually on the spinning ball going around the sun. But because on the flat Earth, the sun goes around above us, it takes exactly 24 hours per single rotation to go around above us, and that's why it's always overhead at midday, more or less in your local time zone, of which there's about 24 time zones around the planet Earth.
Yeah. So day and night are based off of the Earth's rotation around itself, its own axis, not based off of its axis around the sun. So in 6 months, the Earth will be on the opposite side of the sun, But luckily, we designed day and night times to be based off of whether or not the Earth is facing the sun, not about its position where it is located around the sun. So it's the day and night cycle is a separate cycle from the calendar year. Those are two separate cycles.
It's a cool story there, T-Jump, but the fact is we measure a day with a fixed amount of time. It doesn't matter what we call it. If you want to call it 23 hours and 56 minutes and 4 seconds, the sidereal day of what we observe the stars going around above us, you can call it that. You can call it 24 hours as we do. Whatever the fact is, we use a fixed mechanical clock to measure exactly 24 hours every single day, which means that the clock itself, from the example I used, if you made a big circle around the sun, the clock is always going to be in the same position as it goes in a big circle around the sun. So day and night would indeed swap place.
No. That it would depend on the time. Like if we made it 30 hours days, then yes, it would. If the days were 30 hours long, then you're right. It would change position as time went on.
It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant so long as the amount of time is fixed. It doesn't matter what amount you give it. Whatever value is irrelevant. It's fixed. It's the same every day. That's the issue that the globers can't get. They just say, oh, it's 23 hours, 56 minutes and a little bit, and that way it keeps the sun. We don't have to adjust our clocks, but we don't adjust our clocks. The clock is the fixed amount of time regardless of what you call it. Just being
so like if we have a ball and we're moving the ball around a light bulb, if the faster we move the ball, the slower the ball has to be spinning for a day. So like imagine if the ball wasn't spinning at all, it was just like fixed, we moved around, then one rotation around the sun would also be 1 day. So like if the ball did not in any way rotate, it was just going around the sun in a fixed position, then the 1 year and the 1 day time would be exactly the same. But if we start changing those times, then we can have a daytime that is a certain number of days per year. You can count those, and then we have two different measurements now, so we can make them separate numbers.
Yes, and we've got 365.25 rotations of the ball to create 1 year.
Yeah,
but each one of those rotations is exactly one rotation of exactly 24 hours.
No, that's why we have leap years.
No, we have leap years because of the quarter day. And because it takes that extra quarter for the stars to align, and we like to keep our solstices and equinoxes on the same day every year.
What
every
is the sun?
Years, we add another day.
The sun is a star, bro.
Oh, well, you can think of it like a star, but it's not a star.
It's literally a star.
Shall we move on, gentlemen?
Sure.
Okay. From Neon Soul for 5 pounds or euros for Iron Horse. Why things fall in a vacuum instead of floating? By your logic, the resistance should be the same from all sides.
That's totally illogical. There's no resistance in a vacuum. Zero amount of resistance. If you made a non-vacuum and you made, I don't know, everything the same density as the vacuum, like a molecule of gas will not float in a vacuum because it's not a vacuum anymore the minute you put a molecule of gas in there. So that's a ridiculous thing to think that non-resistance is going to create buoyancy. You need density to create buoyancy, not lack of density. It gives nothing.
If there's a vacuum on all four sides have equal resistance, right? 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. They're all the same. They're all 0. Right? Right. So if you have a vacuum, all the sides have equal density, 0. It's equal density everywhere.
Well, in that case, you'd have to be assuming a universal sized vacuum with nothing else in it, and in which case you wouldn't know you're moving even if you were. So that works, yeah, you are floating.
Because that was the question.
Because the question chamber has floors and walls and it's a chamber, there is a down.
How does the chamber add a force in a vacuum?
Because it's the place of resistance. And so the thing hits the place of resistance and it goes no further because it has more mass than nothing.
Okay. From K Tikari, sent $2 super chat with no question attached. So thank you so much for that. We really appreciate it. If you have another question that you wanted to attach to that, but you missed it, then just go ahead and send that in. We are out of super chats right now. So if you have a super chat that you want to send in, ladies and gentlemen, go ahead and send that, and it will be read immediately following the completion of the next question that we read.
I got one
from Dave.
I got a super chat on my end. If the Earth is flat, why are other planets spheres?
that creates two assumptions in the first place. One, that planets even exist, and two, that Earth is even a planet. We're not in outer space. The whole flat Earth concept is that we are the only physical plane in existence at the bottom of the known universe, and the lights in the sky are not terra firma. And if they were terra firma, then they would drop to Earth.
Gotcha. All right. From David H. Is reality a hoax?
More than likely. I wouldn't be surprised.
What?
Well, everything is interpretation through signals that we receive through our senses. And so basically all of reality exists within the mind of the observer. So technically, without an observer, reality doesn't even exist. So at the moment, there's currently about 8 billion different versions of the human universe at this stage, and probably trillions and trillions of other versions of the universe from the perspective of other living conscious organisms. But technically, everything is within.
Gotcha. From Extra J at Iron Horse, why don't meteorites fall back up?
Yes, we've never seen a meteorite fall up, and to be honest, I'm a bit dubious about whether they even come from outer space. Like, I haven't seen any evidence for them. Most of the times, if we do find shrapnel or something from something, it's usually something we can explain from Earth-based material. And obviously, on a physical planar Earth at the bottom of the known universe, there is only one universal down, and anything of mass is going to go that direction. We never actually see meteorites going up from the horizon, for example, assuming they exist.
What about the gigantic holes in the ground we see
Gigantic holes? Well,
from meteorites.
that could be explained by a number of other things. A giant open-cut mine, for example, back in the day when we still had all this lost technology of things that we can no longer build today. We see all sorts of examples of things that exist now we've got no answer for, especially ancient buildings and whatnot. Even the pyramids.
Gotcha. From Victor Halleck for $5 for Iron Horse. What is the difference between density and gravity?
Well, gravity is a pseudo force saying that the attraction of mass comes from things of density, whereas we just say things of density are what creates matter, and matter and combined with volume gives something weight, and weight relative to its environment determines whether it goes up or down. So density and buoyancy is just pure simple physics. Gravity is a pseudo belief that says things of mass attract one another regardless of direction.
Gotcha. From Paul Anker, all T-Jump has done is assume a force. He has not explained why it exists.
Okay, it's the curvature of space-time manifold. It is the fact that objects in space bend space and cause things to fall towards them. That's why it exists.
Gotcha. From Daryl Frost says, sorry, T-Jump, tides are not water movement, and waves do not transport water. The water stays still, but the wave moves.
Literally, waves are water movements. Yes, they do move. That is a thing. It's why they go on land. The water, if the water didn't move, they couldn't end up on land.
Gotcha. From Mark Reed says, oh, so what causes the waves? Does he, that's Iron Horse, think that some divine being is doing it?
Well, I guess in a way, since heliocentrism is all based on sun worship, then obviously the sun is God in the heliocentric belief, and so technically that is a divine being, and it is the force from the heat and motion of the sun moving around us once every 24 hours that creates the weather, and it's the weather that creates the waves and the swell. So in a sense, I guess you could say it's a great divine being doing it.
Gotcha. Kevin says, I don't have any money, But what shampoo does Iron Horse use for his beard? LOL.
Yeah. I just
Beer
squeeze
shampoo?
it out every morning and it's clean again.
Roger that. From Say Montreal says, please ask TJump which gravity was he referring to, Newtonian or Einsteinian, and if he knows, both are wrong.
General and special relativity was Einsteinian gravity. It's not wrong. It's not complete, but it's not wrong. It's just not complete.
Roger that. From East Fremantle says, question, why are we taller when we wake up and shorter when we go to bed at night? Is it gravity? I think that's for you, Iron Horse.
Do you want to go first, teacher?
What? Sure. Because our body gets compressed, I guess, from standing weight.
Yeah, I'd probably just say it's a compression of our muscles and joints that wear us down over the period of a day, because our body itself does have mass and it presses down on itself. And we've also got the atmosphere above us, so when we relax and spread out, that gives a chance for everything to go back to its natural state again without all that pressure down on us. I doubt you could barely measure it, though.
Gotcha. From Absolute Zero, if gravity isn't true, then what force makes massive objects attracted to one another?
Well, that's a furphy. Nothing. There's no evidence of large objects being attracted to one another. It's you've got magnetism, you've got static electricity, you've got electromagnetism. Those things will attract things to one another, but by virtue of mass alone, you do not have any form of natural attraction. It's an absolute perfect.
Sorry, I'm trying to shoo my cat. Go. Sorry.
I got a question for him while you're shooing your cat. When will you be publishing your findings for peer review? Have you spoken to astrophysicists about your hypothesis?
I'm still working on it. I'm still only young. I figured I'll wait till I'm about 70, maybe 80, so that they can publish it posthumously like they do for all the famous physicists. I don't want to rush into this thing.
Okay. From Tinkle Tink wants to know what flavor of vape I have, and that is strawberry blast. So I just happen to have that right here. From Mango Tea, they say for $7.99. TJump, when are we going to debate on Modern Day Debate?
Set it up with James. I have no idea who you are, but sure, do it. Also pay me.
Roger that. From Mark Reed, what determines weight? Did he, that's you, Iron Horse, say that buoyancy creates weight?
No, I said the mass, the density of the mass times the amount of volume that it has. So you can have something very small, but it can be very dense, so it will weigh quite a lot more than something that's very large that isn't very dense, and it won't have nearly as much weight. So it's the overall density per volume that determines weight. No invisible pulling forces required.
Density determines weight.
Density is basically, the density of the medium is what determines the resistance. So, for example, you might be able to weigh yourself in the medium of air and be a certain weight, but if you put that same scale into water, then that density of medium is going to make you appear to be a lot lighter. But you yourself are still at the same mass, the same density, same volume. You are still the same weight. The ability to weigh something doesn't necessarily determine what its true weight actually is.
What is light weigh?
What is light weight?
Yeah.
Or what does light weigh?
Yes.
I would say it doesn't weigh anything. That's why it's called light.
So why doesn't it go up? Because if relative density is a thing and light weighs nothing, then all light should go up, right?
No, it's just there. It's not a thing of mass. It's an electrovibration of the atmosphere of causing photons to glow of the molecules of particular gases and stuff. It's a whole other subject that we could enter into another day if you'd like to discuss that one next. Why doesn't light go up?
Okay. And then from Mark Reed, oh no, I said just read that one. From Travis Statham says to Iron Horse, if the Bible said the Earth was a planet and gravity was real, would you then believe it?
Not necessarily. I'd treat the Bible like any other historical book and see what relevance it has to the observations that we can make today. If the observations they made 2,000 years ago match what we can make today, then I'll say, yeah, that's quite relevant. But if it says something that I can turn around and prove with many, many examples, especially because we have modern photography and digital cameras and things we can send up very high these days, I'd turn around and say, well, no, the Bible is probably wrong. Because I don't treat the Bible as anything special compared to any other historical book. It can have relevance in many cases. It could be useful for many people. It might have good philosophy in it. But when it comes to physical sciences, I think I'd turn around to do what we can do today with today's technology.
Gotcha. Roger that. From Mango T for $7.99, they say, gravity exists. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to sleep with your wife and have babies. Without gravity existing, you are entirely incorrect.
So people in the space station can't make babies?
Correct.
That's sad.
That it is impossible because their blood flow stops them from being able to get erect. You can't have sex in space, unfortunately.
Really? I did not.
Huh.
I've never heard that. That's crazy.
But isn't Earth in space?
It's close enough to a very large gravitational force that allows our bodies to function, called the Earth.
So we can get it up despite gravity. Cool.
Because of gravity. Thanks to gravity. Only because of gravity.
All right. From David Acid D, Punch Drunk. For 5 euros, I think, or maybe pounds. If Iron Horse can spend the rest of the stream with one leg held up, showing no movement downwards, I will believe gravity doesn't exist. What's it worth to you?
Yeah. I don't think that's going to be happening because we know that muscular strength.
No takers, David.
Just turn your camera upside down and point it at your leg. There you go. Problem solved.
Send a bigger super chat next time. All right. From Neon Soul for 5 says, let's try again. If we hold a glass with water in it, why isn't the water going up? The air on top is less dense than the glass below and to the sides.
Exactly. The air is less dense. So something more dense passes through, displaces the less dense thing until finding a place of resistance, which is the glass, because it's more dense than the water. If the water is more dense than the glass, it would pass through the glass. But glass is pretty strong. So that's when it comes to solids, most solids are dense enough to resist something else of density. Unless you hit it with a lot of force, like a fire hose.
Roger that. From Victor Halleck for $5 says, Iron Horse, what leading flat earth thinkers do you recommend following and or books to read?
What leading flat earth what?
Flat earth thinkers. Should we follow, or what books should we read?
I think you should think for yourself. Look into as much as you can find. You know, I personally like having Globebusters 24/7 on in the background. Because they always promoting a lot of variety of different YouTube users. So you will see a great deal of people that you wouldn't otherwise be able to find. So definitely recommend them. Personally, I haven't read any good flat earth books. I'm sure there's plenty of them, but yes, I don't have a reading list.
That makes me think of a juicy question. Is there any flat earth thinkers that you would definitely not recommend we listen to?
I think everyone has some sort of relevance. You know, I'm not saying that they're all 100% correct all of the time. We're all still on a bit of a learning curve ourselves. So, you know, there's some
one that you would definitely dissuade us from listening to. There's no flat earth arguments that you've heard that you say definitely not.
Well, no, because I think even a broken clock can be right twice a day. So even the ones that are quite often wrong, they've still got enough relevance to add that if you've got enough discernment for yourself, then that's what you need to rely upon. Don't rely upon anybody but yourself to discern everything you possibly can for yourself.
Roger that. Extra juicy. From John H for $5. T-Jump. At what size do all observable flat bodies of water start to curve?
I don't know.
8 inches per mile squared.
Well, I didn't know the answer to that one, but I'm supposed to be neutral.
Never.
Eureka Acuri for moon landings, real or fake?
Moon landing is
or
real.
fake is the question. The question is moon landings, real or fake?
Real. We see the pieces that are still there. We can like bounce lasers off of them.
It was a really good hoax that they've done in the studio, but anybody that believes that we've actually been to the moon, well, they might be insane.
Or maybe not the first time, actually. From Mark Reed, how do you explain the Cavendish experiment showing mass attracting?
Oh, the banana experiment. Yes, well, that's torsion bar suspended in the air, and nothing can ever be left completely at rest. And so eventually those balls are going to come to rest somewhere against something, and because you put other big balls in the way, that's where they're going to come to rest at. You've also got the other factor of static electricity, because you're using balls, and so you've also got air rotating around them all the time, so it's eventually going to build up some amount of static electricity that's going to pull them towards one another, potentially. And the last one of all that completely disproves the banana experiment is that Earth's gravity is so much more massive than the large ball outside of either side of the torsion bar. That's just a matter of luck that it could overcome Earth's gravity if gravity was actually a thing. It's just going to come to rest somewhere eventually, and it proves nothing. And it's often failed by most people that try and perform the experiment anyway.
Roger that. From Mark Twain, wants me to show my cat, I think, but my cats are put away right now. I think I'll try to pull them out for the after show, but they're put away right now, so sorry. From Travis Statham says to Iron Horse, so you're saying you're actually an atheist?
No, I would never call myself an atheist. I definitely believe in higher beings of all sorts. I wouldn't say that there's just a special God that, you know, there obviously has to be an initial source of everything, but I think our ability to comprehend what that could possibly be is beyond our ability to even try to think about. But definitely not an atheist. I believe in higher powers all around us, and many of which we would probably call, if we had met one, we'd probably think of that as God, but it's probably just a messenger, an angel or something.
Gotcha. Well, that brings us to the end of our super chats and all of our questions. Let me double check to make sure nobody else sent anything else. The last couple seconds. Looks like no. Okay. Well, that will wrap us up for tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to say thank you to all the moderators in the chat for keeping the discourse elevated. Thank you to James for creating this platform. Thank you to everybody in the audience for watching, and everybody who sent super chats and questions. Thank you to everybody else. Thank you to the debaters. You guys are the lifeblood of the show. Thank you for participating and keeping the discussion lively. So once again, to everybody, like the video if you liked it, share it if you want to spread it, and subscribe. We have many more debates coming your way. Our speakers are linked below. Check them out. Do it now. Check out the after show in a little bit, about 10-15 minutes or so. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night, and remember to keep sifting out the reasonable from the unreasonable. You guys all have a great night. Goodbye.
Cheers.